Masechet Gittin Daf Ayin Tet Hayita omedet al Rosh Hagag uzrako la Kevan shehigia la'avir Hagag harezo megoreshet. If a woman is the wife is standing on top of a roof and the husband is throwing it from outside of the roof onto the roof, once it gets to the airspace of the roof, she is already divorced. Here we have a little picture here. If the guy is standing on the ground and he throws the get, and the Gemara will talk about whose rooftop it is and conclude that it's his, but he's allowing her to use it to acquire the get. And so it doesn't have to land on the roof. Even if it gets to the airspace above the roof, that is already considered that it's acquired by her. However, the other way around, if the husband was on the roof and he's throwing it down onto the ground, let's say that's a courtyard that she is in her possession, that she can use to acquire the get, it doesn't have to land on the ground. Rather, once it leaves the airspace of the roof, then that's already outside of his domain, and now it's within the airspace of the courtyard where she can acquire it. Therefore, let's say he throws it, and then it goes beyond the roof airspace, and then it suddenly self-destructs, burns up. That's fine, or gets erased, disappearing ink, and it disappears while it's in the air above the courtyard beyond the roof. She is divorced, right? She doesn't have to keep the get as long as it got into her possession. She is divorced. Good. Now the Gemara asks, "Veha la mintar." And now we ask about the case where the husband throws it on the roof. It's in the airspace. Wait, but it's not secured. It's not watched over there, right? Just because he throws it, let's say he throws it up high, it's way up here, but a wind can easily come and gust and take it away, so it's not secured, so it doesn't come into possession. It doesn't have to land on the bottom, but it has to be secured that we know it will land. And the answer is Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel begag sheyesh lo ma'akeh askinan. We're talking about a roof that has a fence around it, and it already goes down, and it's within the airspace of the fence. In other words, it falls below the top of the fence, and so that way, even though it didn't land on the ground, it is still secure already when it gets to that spot. That's one answer. Ula bar Menashe mishmei de Abimi amar hacha bepachot mishelosha samuch lagag askinan dekol pachot mishelosha samuch lagag ke gag dameh. Here's a different answer. That it fell already down, and it's very close to the top of the roof, within 3 tefachim. We have a concept of lavud. It applies to sukkah, most famously, where a space that's less than 3 handbreadths, we consider it as if it's all filled in. And so therefore, if the get is within 3 tefachim above the roof, it's considered like it already landed. But that would have to be significantly closer than the previous answer, which just says it has to be secured so that it won't fly away above the railing around the roof. Okay, in the other case, if he's on top and he throws it down, so again, the same answer, lo mintar, he's throwing it off the roof, but who knows if it's going to land in the courtyard. Maybe a gust of wind will take it and it'll fly out. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel kigon shehayu mechisot tachtonot odfot ala alyonot. We're talking about a case just like this picture. That's what this picture is for, where the walls of the outer courtyard are higher than the roof and the fence on top of the roof, such that in this case, doesn't matter how big the fence is, or if there is a fence. Right, he's on top of the roof. He throws it. As soon as he throws it, unless he's throwing it very high, but let's say he's just throwing it regular. So he's throwing it, and even when as soon as it passes over the edge of the roof, it's lower than the top of the courtyard wall, and therefore it is in fact secure. וכן אמר רבי אלעזר אמר רבי הושעיה כגון שהיו מחיצות תחתונות עודפות העליונות וכן אמרו לה אמר רבי יוחנן כגון שהיו מחיצות תחתונות עודפות על העליונות. We have this same answer from Shemuel in Bavel and also from Rabbi Hoshaya and Rabbi Yochanan in Eretz Yisrael. They all interpreted it the same way. Amar Rabbi Abba le'ola keman Rabbi damar kiluta kemi sheuncha damya. Rabbi asked Ula, whose opinion does this follow? And Rabbi said, it's the opinion, and Ula said, it's the opinion of Rabbi that said something that's in airspace is considered at rest, even though it didn't land yet, but it's in the airspace. Just like today, if you buy a parcel of land, you own the rights to the airspace also, and to some extent you can build higher than that, whatever. So therefore, that's the opinion of Rabbi. Rabbi says this regarding Shabbat, that for example, if you throw something from Reshut Harabim over Reshut HaYachid and doesn't land in Reshut HaYachid, it goes over into the other Reshut Harabim, one is liable for carrying. It's as if you threw it from Reshut Harabim into Reshut HaYachid. Even though it didn't land in the Reshut HaYachid, Rabbi says that kiluta, the airspace is like it landed there, and therefore, since you're in the Reshut Harabim and you threw it, that's the akira. And even though it only passed over the Reshut HaYachid, that's like hanacha, and that's therefore you're liable. And he says the same thing here. And for here it would be for a leniency. It means that the get would be valid. Amar le afilu tema rabbanan ad kana peligi rabbanan ale derbi ela yanyan Shabbat aval hacham mishum inturehu veha kamintar. Now regarding over there in Shabbat, that's only the opinion of Rabbi. Rabbanan disagree. Rabbanan say no. If it didn't land if it doesn't land, it's not. Then it's not. Then it doesn't count. And therefore, they would say that if a man throws some item, a ball, from Reshut HaRabim into another Reshut HaRabim, even though it goes over Reshut HaYachid in the middle, if it doesn't land in Reshut HaYachid, it doesn't count. And so therefore he is not Chayab. So the Rabbanan disagree. But they disagree. So at first we said this Mishnah has to be only the opinion of Rabbi, because the get is being thrown into the airspace of the courtyard, and still we consider it as if it landed. So is that only opinion of Rabbi? We don't want the Mishnah to be only a minority opinion. So we say no, in fact, it could be Rabbanan. And Rabbanan only disagree with Rabbi regarding Shabbat, because in the case of Shabbat, the question is that considered landing or not landing? So that's the machloket. But regarding a get, we don't need it to land. That's not, for Shabbat, you need an akira and a hanacha. So is airspace considered hanacha or not? That's what the machloket is. But if for get, even Rabbanan would agree that we don't need hanacha. We need it to be secured. And it is secured as long as there are walls and the get is already below the top of the wall. So it's secured that a wind will not come and fly and blow it away. And therefore, everyone would agree that it is a good get. That same conversation is now repeated with different names. V'chen amar bi aseh. Amar Rabbi Yochanan kegon shemechisot tachtonot odfot alionot. Amar le Rabbi Zeral Rabbi Aseh keman kerebi damar kiluta kemi shehuncha damya. So again, Rabbi Yochanan says that we're talking about a case where the walls of the courtyard are higher than the roof. And the Rabbi Zara asked Rabbi Aseh, whose opinion is this? It's Rabbi that says as long as it gets into the airspace of the courtyard, it's already like it it's at rest, and that's why it's a good get. But that would only be the opinion of Rabbi. And Rabbi, is that true? Our Mishnah is only opinion of Rabbi. And it gives the same answer that even Rabbanan would make a distinction between Shabbat, where it needs to land in order to be liable carrying on Shabbat, whereas a get does not need to land, it just has to be secured. Good. Nimhak. Now, the Mishnah said, if it's in the middle of the air and suddenly it gets erased, the divorce is effective because it got into her airspace already before it got erased. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Bar Avu Lo shanu ela shenimchak derech yirida aval nimchak derech aliyah lo ma'itama meikara la lemenach ka'eh. So Rav Nachman Bar Avu says this: if it gets erased, it has to be on its way down. The husband throws it upwards in an upward angle, and at some point, right, it loses its velocity going up and starts going down. So it has to start going down before it gets erased. But if it got erased while it's still going up, even though it's in the airspace of the courtyard and left the airspace of the roof, Nevertheless, if it's still going up, it doesn't count. It has to start going down. What's the reason? Because initially, before it starts going down, it's not destined to land. Like we look at that moment, we freeze it and look at the trajectory. It's like calculus, right? What's the slope of that line? And you see it's still going up. And if you'd continue that line, it would be going higher and higher, right way out to space, and would not be landing. And therefore, we can't consider that to be an acquisition just yet. On its way down, then we can make we can extend the line and see, we see it's going down, starting to go down. It's going to go down further. It's in the airspace. Only then is it immediately valid, and therefore it can get erased afterwards, and we don't care. Nisraf. Also, if it burns in the middle of the air, that's also good. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Abba bar Abu lo shanu ela shekadam get la deleka aval kadma deleka la get lo ma'itama mehikera lisrefa ka'azil. Rav Nachman explains that the Mishnah, which says it's a good get if it gets burnt, that's only if the get is thrown while it's not on fire. He throws the get, it gets into the airspace, it's a valid get, and then it goes on fire, then it's okay. But let's say it's already starting to burn, right? Already when it's in his hand, and he throws it, so then it's no good. Why? Because again, we look at the trajectory. This time not at space, but rather what's happening to this item. And so if it's already on fire before it takes effect, so then we say this is a document on fire, and in a few minutes it will be totally burnt and gone. So therefore it's not a good get. Rather, we need that the get will be effective while it's still whole, intact, not on fire. And then if it's already in the airspace of the woman and it already took effect, then it can burn, and we don't need it anymore. Amar Rav Chisda, Rishiyot halukot begittin. Rav Chisda declared a halacha that regarding a get, different domains are separated. For example, if a husband says, "Here, you can use this rooftop to acquire your get," right? And I'll throw it onto the roof. So then it has to get on the roof. It's not going to work if it goes on the barn or on the doghouse or in the empty space of the courtyard or the trampoline. These are all different items, and they are separate domains regarding Gittin. So Rami Bar Chama asks Rava, how did the elder Rav Chisda know this halacha? What's his derivation? The Mishnah said that she is standing on the top of the roof. She's standing there, meaning she's watching over it. It doesn't have to get into her hand, so this is her domain. And he throws it from the courtyard up to the roof, and as long as it gets to the airspace of the roof, her get is valid. And what kind of case are we talking about? If the rooftop is hers and the whole courtyard is hers, and he happened to come over and is in her courtyard, and he throws it onto her roof. Well, why do we need it to get to the airspace of the roof? If she owns the whole courtyard, then as soon as he just throws it, her courtyard will already acquire it for her. So it can't be talking about a case where everything belongs to her. So let's go the opposite. If he owns the courtyard and he owns the roof too, then what does it help if it gets to the airspace of the roof? That's still his domain, right? It would not be good until it goes into her hand. So that can't be the case of the Mishnah either. So rather it must be that the roof is hers, but the courtyard is his. That would make sense. It's his courtyard, and she owns that building and with that roof. So he is throwing it from his domain, the courtyard, to her roof. That's why it only takes effect when it passes the border of the airspace of the roof. Fine. But Ema Sefa, hu milmala vehi milamata zrakola, kevan sheyasam reshut hagag, nimchak od nisaf harezo megoreshet, vi begag dida vechaser dide, amai megoreshet, ela begag dide vechaser dida. So we're assuming that the Resha and the Sefa have to be the same case. So let's apply that to the Sefa, where he is up on the roof and she is below in the courtyard, and he throws it. And once it leaves the airspace of the roof, then it's a valid get, and it doesn't matter if it gets erased or burnt afterwards. Well, if it's the same case and the roof is hers and the chaser is his, then why would she be megoreshet? He's throwing it from her domain into his own domain. That doesn't make any sense. Rather, it's clear that the sefa is talking about where the rooftop is his. He's there, and the courtyard is hers, and she's down there. So how could you have two different cases? So Rava says, so that's all part of Rava's question. Resha begag dida vechaser dide, sefa begag dide vechaser dida. Can it be that the resha is in the resha, the roof is hers, and in the sefa, the roof is his, and the opposite with the courtyard? That wouldn't make sense. So this is all the answer, part of the answer to Rami Bar Chama. So Rava is saying it can't be all hers. It can't be that everything is his, and it can't be one and one either. So now we're stuck, right? What kind of case would the Mishnah be Mishnah's law apply to? Ela lav de oshla makom de had makom moshle inashe tere makomot la moshle inashe. Rather, it must be that in fact the husband owns everything, the courtyard and the rooftop, but he is lending her some space in order to acquire her get. And so he's either lending her, he says you could use the rooftop, or he's saying you can use the courtyard. But a person will lend one spot, right? That's all you need is one spot so that he can place the get there, throw the get there. There's no need to give her more than that. And so people are going to give the minimum possible. So people will lend one space, but not many spaces. And therefore we see that this is a derivation of Rav Chista's rule that domains are separate, right? And each domain, each item is its own domain. Again, not if it's just a little block of a cinder block, but rather something that's big enough to be significant. Is its own domain, and therefore only that works and is separate from the other items that happen to be in the same courtyard. Amar le midi irya, Ram Bar Chama rejected this and said to Rava, Dilma hakediita vehakediita resha begagdida vechaser dide sefa begagdide vechaser dida. Ram Bar Chama says, wait, go back to one of your presumptions that you rejected, and very well could be that each case is talking about different circumstances. In the resha, it's giving you an example where the roof belongs to her and the courtyard to him. And the sefa is giving you an example of the other way around. And it just wants to give you show you different scenarios. But it could be that it's in fact a different scenario. It even says, he's over there, she's there, he's over here. And so Rami Bar Chama thinks it is readable that way, and therefore you don't have to say that you don't have to agree with Rav Chista. Because if she happens to actually own that rooftop and he owns the courtyard, so then that's why it has to be thrown from one to the other, and not because we assume domains are separate because a husband would only lend a partial domain. Amarava, shalosh midot Gittin. Okay, that's the end of that discussion. And now Rava, this is a very a conceptual section here. Is a good example of the way the Bavli in general and Rava in particular takes traditions and builds a conceptual model in order to put them in. So this is going to be 3 examples where the laws of Gittin are different from the laws of Shabbat. In both of them, there is an issue about Shabbat is carrying, where you have to transfer from one domain to another to be chayav. In Gittin also, we need a transfer of the get from him to her, but even though they're similar in that way, there are 3 ways in which they are different. So one of them we mentioned already, regarding the B's opinion that the airspace is considered as if it's at rest regarding Shabbat, and the rabbis disagree, but that disagreement is only true for Shabbat, because on Shabbat you need to lift something up and transfer it and put it down. You need something to be put down, so the Banan require it to be physically put down on the ground. The B said the airspace is enough, it's like putting it down. However, aval hacha mishum turehu v'hamintar, regarding a get, we don't need hanacha. It's not like the laws of Shabbat. We need it to be secured, and so as long as it's within airspace and has and under the top of the walls, that's already secured, So that's one difference. V'hadamar Rav Chisda na'as kaneh b'reshut hayachid u'b'roshot teraskal v'zarak v'nach al gabav afilu gavoa me'ama chayav lefi shereshut hayachid ole la'rakia hanemi l'lian Shabbat aval acha mishum inturehu v'ha'ala mintar. Another difference would be the opinion of Rav Chisda, who said, let's say you take a stick and you put it in the middle of Reshut HaYachid. And all the way, it's a very tall stick, and on the top of it, you put a basket. It's kind of like basketball. This is the source of basketball. And you throw something, and it goes into that basket up there. Even if it's 100 amot high, nevertheless, the person who threw it, the person who throws it is in the Reshut HaRabim, and he throws it up high into that basket. That is liable because Reshut HaYachid goes up to the sky. It's different. Reshut HaRabim, there's a separation point at 10 tefachim. But Reshut HaYachid goes from the ground all the way up to the sky. So even if he throws it and it lands in that basket high up, one is liable for Shabbat because that's called landing in the Reshut HaYachid. However, if it was the same thing with a get, and the husband takes the get and he throws it into her domain, right? Let's say the Reshut HaYachid is her domain, the basket is hers, and he throws it up there. No good, because it's not secure up there, right? The wind will just blow it away. And since it's not secure up there, it is not a good get. So once again, the principle of acquisition or of transfer for a Shabbat is different from transfer for a get. And the third one, V'hadamar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Lo ya'amod adam begag ze v'yilkot megeshamim migago shel chavero, shekeshem shedayorin halukin melemata, kach dayorin halukin melema'ala. If two people have two homes that are adjacent to each other, and let's say they don't make an Eruv. So I'm not allowed, let's say on the ground level, I can't take something from my home and transfer it to your home because I have a Reshut HaYachid and you have a Reshut HaYachid. So I can't pass something over on the ground level. Same is true on the upper story on the roof. Let's say I'm on my roof and I want to collect some rain and I stick my bucket and over the border onto your roof, right? But they're right adjacent to each other. This is a problem of carrying. I'd be carrying from the rain that's landing on your side and bringing it over to my side, right? Just like there's residences below, so too we consider the residences to travel upwards, and so I can't carry even from your roof to my roof. That is true, however, only for Shabbat. Hanemi l'lian Shabbat, aval inyan get mishum kepedahu v'chulehai la kapede inashe. That's only true for Shabbat. For a get, let's say the husband says, "Here, you can use the roof of this house to acquire your get." And so she goes up, she's on that roof, and then the get lands on the roof adjacent to it, so which also belongs to the husband. Now, the husband's not going to care. He's not so particular. He says, "Oh no, I only meant that you can have this roof, but not that roof." Since the husband is not particular, so it all depends on his mindset. And if he thinks, "Oh, that's fine, right?" And any rooftop that I own, I will lease out to her so she can acquire her get, right? People don't care about that. But we said yesterday, people don't care about the small space that the legs of a bed stand on or where a basket is. And so this would be the same here. So again, another conceptual difference between the laws of Shabbat, where it's technically about where this domain ends and this domain begins, this ownership ends and this ownership begins. Here, it's just about what the husband has in mind. And if he's okay with it, then it's a valid get. Amad Abaye, shete chaserot, zo lifnim mizo pnimit shela v'chisona shelo, u'mechisot ha'chisonot odfot al ha'pnimiyot, uzra kola, kevan shehegia la'avir mechisot ha'chisona, hare zo megoreshet. You have two courtyards, one within the other. The inner one belongs to her, the outer one belongs to him. But the walls of the outer one are higher than the walls of the inner one. And he then throws it from his outer courtyard into his inner courtyard. Once it gets to the airspace of the inner courtyard, even if it's above the walls of the inner courtyard, that's permitted because the walls of the outer courtyard are higher and will provide sufficient protection. As we say here, my tama penimit gufa b'mechisot achisona kaminatera. So even though the outer ones, this is really just like the picture we had up here, even though the outer, right, make believe this is hers, let's say it's a courtyard instead of a house, but it has a fence, and the outer one has a higher fence. So as long as it gets to the airspace, even though it's above the courtyard walls of the inner courtyard, but it still is protected from wind by the outer walls. So that's sufficient protection, and therefore it is a get even before it goes into the airspace of the walls of the inner courtyard. מה שאין כן בקופות, בשתי קופות זו בתוך זו, פנימית שלה וחיסונה שלו זרקו לה, אפילו הגיע לאוויר פנימית, אינה מגורשת מהטעמה, דהה לא נח. So this is a different law from, it's not the same with baskets. A basket can only acquire something when it gets into the airspace of the basket, meaning below the rim of the basket. So if you had two baskets, outer and an inner one, the inner one belongs to her, the outer bigger one has higher walls and belongs to him, and he throws it into the basket, even though it got into the airspace, meaning vertically, it's above, it's hovering above the inner basket, but in terms of the height, it only went into the below the height of the rim of the outer basket, but did not yet reach the height of the rim of the inner basket. It's no good, right? Because here it's not about wind coming, it's about acquisition. And my ta'ama deha lo nach, and it didn't rest in the basket, right? It's still hovering above. So it has to get a little lower till below the rim. And then the inner basket can acquire it. So it's different from a courtyard. A courtyard, the airspace goes up to heaven, and so it will acquire it as long as it's protected from wind, but the protection from wind can be, or even from an outer courtyard, whereas a basket does not acquire until it gets into the airspace below the rim of the basket. Now we say vechi nach mai haveh, and even when it gets into that lower part, so what? Kelav shelokech b'reshut mocher hu. There's still going to be a problem because this is the vessel of the buyer. It's in the domain of the seller. In other words, the small basket is within the big basket, and so this is a problem. Like we said yesterday, that example of bringing your own shopping bag, your own basket into a store. So it's not yours, even if the store owner puts stuff in it. It's still not going to be yours because it's in his store. And the vessel cannot, well, according to one opinion, a vessel cannot acquire for you if it's in someone else's domain. So then this basket will still be a problem. So we answer, we're talking about a basket that has no bottom, like the case here. So yeah, we have an outer basket, but the basket has no bottom. Since it has no bottom, the inner basket that belongs to her and is not in the domain of the husband. It's just that he has these walls of a basket. It's true, but since there's no bottom, and this inner basket is on the floor itself, so it's just on the floor and is in her own domain and not in the husband's domain. So therefore, we don't have that problem. The next Mishnah is about get yashan. We already introduced to this concept. Bet Shammai omerim poter adam ishto beget yashan, bet Hillel osrin. Ve'ezehu get yashan kol shnityahed ima me'achar sheketabo la. Bet Shammai says that a get yashan is valid, and he can divorce his wife with a get yashan. And Bet Hillel says no, it's prohibited. He doesn't say it's not a good get. He's just saying midrabanan, one should not use it. Now, what is a get yashan? It's when, let's say he wrote a get today, but didn't give it to her yet, and then he's waiting a while, and then let's say a month later, they are secluded together, and only after that, and then they're secluded together. That's already get yashan, and Bet Shammai says it's fine. Bet Hillel says do not use that get if they were secluded together after it was written. But my kami palge, what is the reason for their argument? Bet Shammai sabre lo amrinan gezerah. Shema yomeru gita kodem libna. Bet Shammai thinks that we do not have to make a gezerah, that people may think that the get came before they had a child. Let's say they were secluded together and they had relations and had a child. We don't worry that people are going to say that this was done out of wedlock. Or Bet Hillel sabre amrinan gezerah shema yomeru gita kodem libna. Bet Hillel says we do worry about this, right? If the get was written today, and then they went and had relations with each other in a month from now, and she gives birth 9 months later, people will do the math and say, wait, look, it says there's a divorce paper here, and it says they were divorced 10 months ago, and the baby was just born. Seems suspicious. This baby is problematic. And so they may cast aspersions about it, even though technically they were still married, because he only wrote the get, he didn't give it to her yet. So there's no real problem. So Bet Shammai says it's fine, but Bet Hillel says no, we don't want to give an opportunity for false rumors to spread that will harm this child. Now, according to Bet Hillel, what if someone does give a get yashan? Right? He did it. He's not supposed to. Then midrabanan, he goes against that law. However, he wrote the get. He slept with his wife or was secluded with her, and then he gave the get after. According to Rabbi Abba in the name of Shemuel, if she should not get married after that, she should get another valid get. But bidi avad, if she already got married to a second husband, we're not going to make her divorce her, because technically the first get midoraita was okay. That's one version. Another one is more lenient and says a husband should not give that get, but if he did give the get already, then she can even go ahead and get married lehatechila. The thing that shouldn't be done is giving the get in the first place. But if he gave it, she can get married. According to first version, if even after he gives it, she should still not get married. Only if she did get married to a second guy, then she doesn't have to go and get divorced. Okay, and now we're going to start the next Mishnah. It's a long Mishnah. We'll do half of it today. כתב לשום מלכות שאינה הוגנת, לשום מלכות מדי, לשום מלכות יוון, לבניין הבית לחורבן הבית. You have to write a date in the get. And the date, unlike what we do today, that we count from some ancient, beginning of some time period, if nowadays, let's say you lived in England, you would write the first year of King Charles. You're supposed to write from the life of the government that you're in, right? The local government, the emperor, whoever it is. So, if someone does not do that, instead, for example, they write from the date of the empire, the illegitimate empire. This is the way that Mishnah is talking about the Roman Empire. Now, they were living under the Romans, and so commentaries explain that. Let's say someone is not in the Roman Empire. If you're in Bavel under the Persian Empire, then you cannot date your get to the Roman Empire. If you're in Rome, then that's fine. Or in the Roman Empire, then that's okay. Okay, so if you write to the an empire that's a current empire, but it's not the one where you live, that's not a good get. We'll see. It's a half a good get in all these cases. If you do the kingdom, the empire of Madai, or that of the Hellenistic, the Greek Empire, these were already long gone, destroyed. Madai was around at the same time as the Persian Empire, and the Greeks, the Romans, destroyed them back in 63 BCE. So this is, if you just continue counting, actually, this would be relevant because there was the Seleucid calendar that was started by the Greek Emperor Seleucus, and that people used continuously. Even the rabbis, until the times of the Geonim, they were still using the Seleucid calendar, even though there were no more Seleucids and no more Greeks around. The empire was gone. So that's no good. You can't use that, even though it was in common use. Not good for a get. You cannot date it from the time since the Bet HaMikdash was built, nor can you date it since the Bet HaMikdash was destroyed. The Gemara will explain why. Or if he wrote the location of the writing and signing of the get, right? That also, you have to put that location. He wrote that where it's being signed in the east, but really it was signed in the west, or the other way around. In all these cases, this get, it's a problematic get, but it's not totally bad, right? If you write something that's just complete nonsense, you write, the first page of Harry Potter and give it, that's not a good get at all. So she's still fully married to the first guy. And if she goes and tries to marry a second guy, that will be adultery, but it won't be marriage at all. In this case, however, since it's mostly right, so it's kind of like a safek get, it's half-half. The Talmud Bavli is going to explain the following penalties as midrabanan, as if the first marriage is doraita and the second marriage are penalties midrabanan. But just like we did in the 10th Perek of Yevamot, the Peshat of the Mishnah is actually that even on a deoraita level, there may be some effectiveness of this get, and therefore the second marriage, we have to worry, may in fact be a good marriage. It's somewhat good, even though the get is not totally good, so she's still in a way married to the first guy and at some level married to the second guy. That's what brings this huge problem. So therefore, here's the consequences. She has to leave both the first husband and the second husband, and she needs another get from the first husband, and she needs a get from the second husband. Now, you understand why she has to leave the first husband and needs a get from him. This get was never fully valid, and now she was with another man, so she can't go back to her first husband. She needs a get from him. She also needs a get from the second husband, even though if the first get was no good, then the second marriage was never anything, so she shouldn't require a get. But because the first get is somewhat valid, so she's somewhat married to the second guy, but she can't stay with the second guy because at that same time she was on some level already married to the first husband, so she requires a get also from the second husband. She does not receive her ketuvah payment from either husband. She also will not receive her produce. If she has land that she owns, so normally after divorce, she can keep her produce, and especially if the husband is not providing anything for her, really she should be able to keep her produce. But what this clause is saying is that, let's say the husband during that time, he took the produce, she cannot get it back. She loses out. So that's a penalty. He does not have to pay for her sustenance, for food. She doesn't take back her worn out clothing. At the end of a marriage, normally, if she brought clothing into it, she gets the clothing out, and even if it's in a ragged state. And neither husband, even though both of them wrote a ketubah at the time of their marriages, they don't have to pay. Neither of them have to pay. If she did collect, let's say, food or the worn out clothing or the ketubah amount, she has to return it to either husband. If she has children from the second husband, they are mamzerim because she was married to the first husband and then had these children in adulterous way. If she has more children after she gets married for the second guy, she goes back to the first husband and has another child. That child is a mamzer because she is somewhat married to the second guy. Of course, any children she had before this whole fiasco or would be fine from the first husband. If either of the husbands are kohanim and she dies, they cannot become tameh for her because a kohen can only become tameh for his legitimate wife and not this one. These are actually for her to her benefit because she is not considered married, meaning because she has to leave both of them and she loses her ketubah. So since she doesn't get any ketubah payment and is not being sustained by her husbands and she can't even live with them at all, so she keeps her anything that she finds or her salary, she gets to keep. The husband does not get it. Also, neither husband can undo her vows. Normally, if a woman is married, the husband can undo her vows on the day that he hears about it. The purpose of that is to keep shalom bayit. If she says, I'm not going to put on makeup anymore, and he says, what? You're not going to put on makeup? I'm undoing that. So we want to avoid fights. But in this case, look good, let them fight and let them, because they have to get divorced, but both husbands have to give her a divorce, right? So we don't mind if they fight. and that prompts them to separate. Hayta bat Yisrael nifselet min hakehuna. If this woman is a bat Yisrael, in fact, any no matter what she is, but we say bat Yisrael to contrast with the next ones. All right, this woman always, from then on, can never marry a kohen anymore, because she was married to one man and then slept with another man. She is now called a zonah. This is even before she actually receives a get. Let's say both husbands are suddenly drop dead. So then she even if she's not a girusha, she still won't be able to marry a kohen as a zonah. Zonah for this halacha doesn't have to mean technically that she received money for like a prostitute. It just means that she was with another man while married to a different one. Bat levim min ha-maaser, bat kohen min ha-teruma. If this woman was a bat levi, she is not entitled to be paid maaser. Right? If I'm a farmer and have maaser, I can give it to any Levi, but not her, because she loses her Levi status. Also, she cannot eat teruma. If she is a daughter of a Kohen, and once she is separated from both of her husbands, she can go back to her father's house as a bat Kohen and normally eat teruma, but because she has this zonah status, she cannot eat teruma anymore. Ve'en yorshim shel zeh v'yorshim shel zeh yorshim ketubata. And her heirs do not inherit her ketubah. Now, she doesn't even get the ketubah in the first place. So isn't that obvious that the heirs are going to get it? This is talking about the clause, this is called benin dichrin, which says that any land that, let's say, she brought into the marriage and was hers, so when she dies, the husband inherits it. When that husband dies, it doesn't get shared equally by all the husband's sons, because he might have many sons from a different marriage. Rather, the land that she brought in will go to her sons, her sons exclusively, and not to his other sons. So that's true in general. In this case, she loses that right as well. If either of the husbands die without children and they have a brother, those brothers have to do chalitza and cannot do yibum. And again, if they were fully married, yeah, you could do yibum, but because that's somewhat divorce, after divorce, you can't do yibum. And so this is somewhat of a divorce, and the second one is nowhere fully a marriage, so you can't do yibum, but is sufficiently enough of a marriage that you still have to do chalitza. Shina shemo ushma. And also, if the sofer wrote the wrong name, right? Wrote a name that's like similar, but made a mistake in the name, or wrote the wrong city in terms of, this is not the city that it was written in and signed in, but rather the city of origin of the husband or of the wife. So in these cases also, it's a somewhat valid get, but it's a problematic one, and therefore she has to leave both husbands, and all of the rest of the consequences that we just mentioned would apply to that get as well. The rest of the Mishnah is going to talk about other cases not related to this first case, but that also have similar consequences. So we'll see that tomorrow. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.